This week, we're pulling back the covers on tech support scams. You'll learn how they fool you and how they've been able to fool the financial system to stay in business, as well as learn how to stay safe from these scams on the podcast that keeps your family safe from scams, hacks, and frauds. Before we start, tech support scams commonly target the elderly and others who don't know much about computers. So if you have someone in your life who doesn't know much about computers, please send a link to this show their way so we can help them too. Today's scam story is the story of Michael Cotter, who was the director or managing director of about half a dozen companies, including Global Digital Concierge, Labs, Kevisoft, and Sensei Ventures. And together they were operating a multinational tech support scam operation. Although they had some operations in the US, UK and Singapore, the bulk of the scamming took place in India in scam call centres. Although it may seem India is synonymous with tech support scams, similar operations do exist in other countries. If you've never come across one of these tech support scams, they typically start with a pop-up window appearing on your screen saying something like this.
Your Windows computer is infected with viruses. Your device is infected with 4 viruses. The pre-scan found possible traces of 3 malware and 1 phishing spyware. Your system is at risk of irreversible damage. Immediate removal advised.
This will be on a page that's designed to mimic the site of a reliable brand. The one we read comes from Microsoft, but we do have testimony from one of Michael's victims where the alert claimed to be from Apple. That one told the victim to call Apple Protection Plan and helpfully provided their phone number. The call centre scammer who answered asked for $250 for lifetime service and a solution to their problem, and also asked for remote access to their computer. If you're not convinced, they'll often try to weaponize unfamiliarity with computers by having you open up the computer's task manager to highlight processes which are completely normal, but they will say is dangerous. And as their victims, or even average users, are unfamiliar with what these are and what their names are, they accept what they're told. On other occasions, scammers will use the command line or command prompt. Most modern users are completely unfamiliar with this, but it's a text-based way of interacting with the computer that predates graphical ways like Windows. In that, they'll run commands that users of a certain age will recognize as very basic commands that will do things like show what folders your computer has and try to tell you that that's a sign of viruses being on your computer. The victim in our story gave remote access to their computer, and from there they installed at least 2 programs claiming to be malware cleaners: Mac Adware Cleaner and Advanced Mac Cleaner. Must be a big problem if they're bringing out the advanced tools. But neither of these tools worked, and later scanners detect these as being adware, creating the very problem they're supposed to be solving. And just to point out there, the user was running a Mac. Although Apple Macs do tend to have less exposure to viruses and malware, they're not immune from these threats. But not to worry, there's a money-back guarantee. So the victim submitted their information to the site asking for a refund, which was of course refused, and instead hit with demands to let the scammers back into their computer to resolve the issue. Now remember how that $250 was supposedly for lifetime service? No, that's not true. The victim was charged another $38 for the software and a recurring charge of $9.99 per month. So even if they're doing what they're promised, which they're not, they're still running a scam operation. The scam victim did report this to the Better Business Bureau, which earned a response back from Michael Cotter, the head of the company, promising to refund the scam victim. Now, before I go on, I want to talk a bit about how debit and credit cards work. You're probably familiar with names like Visa and MasterCard, which are the big 2 in this field, and you probably have a few cards with their logo on it. You can think of card companies as being a bit like the filling in the middle of a sandwich. On one side is your bank or card issuer, and on the other side is the payment processor. And for a scam that relies on taking money through credit and debit cards, these payment processors are a weak link, as losing these payment processors can see you shut down. And if they shut you down, you're shut down until you can replace the payment processor. And that's what was happening in this scam. In 1 month in 2015, no less than 5 card processors had told Michael Cotter and his co-conspirators thanks, but no thanks. Now, you might be thinking this is a principled decision on the card processor's part, like they'd discovered the scam or something. It was nothing so noble. With credit cards, if you have a problem with a purchase or have been scammed, you can often, depending on the laws of where you are, of course, get your money back or reverse the transaction. This is called a chargeback. When a business gets a lot of these chargebacks, the card processors get upset because it starts to cost them money. So they start charging penalties and eventually can cut a business off. And it only takes around 3% of your transactions to be charged back for this to start happening. So businesses taking card payments have a strong incentive to do the right thing, or their card processor will put them out of business. Obviously, scam call centers see chargeback rates much higher than this once their victims catch on. But you'd be surprised by how low, relatively speaking, it is. In some months, these scammers were getting chargeback rates of over 6%, and that was the high watermark. Enough to annoy the card processors, but that still means 94% of their victims either don't know that they were victims of fraud, didn't contact their bank, or the bank got in the way of their chargeback claim. So how on earth do you keep your chargeback so low that the card processor doesn't cut you off whilst running a scam? Michael came up with a plan to bury their fraud in a pile of transactions they knew would not be charged back. Michael started visiting stores and started picking up some cards of his own. Prepaid debit cards. Now, if you've not encountered prepaid debit cards before, they work just like gift cards in that you can load them up with money and then spend the money. But unlike a gift card, you're not just locked into one store to spend it in. You can spend it almost anywhere cards are normally accepted. Michael Cotter and his fellow scammers bought a lot of these gift cards, and I don't just mean a couple of dozen. At one retailer, they bought 100 cards, putting an average of $21 on each card. At another retailer, they bought 500 of these cards, each with $13.95 on them. Those 500 cards were then used to create an additional 3,000 transactions, so about $2.35 per transaction. And these aren't everything. Michael Cotter purchased over $2.4 million in cards. But it was worth it, financially at least, as the scam brought in $13 million over 4 years. Now, to be clear, what Michael was doing is still fraud. They're still obtaining a financial benefit, use of the card processor system, through deception, the prepaid card transactions, even though he's legitimately buying and paying for the prepaid debit cards. Well, as legitimate as you can get when you're using fraudulently obtained money to pay for them. And he wasn't using his own information to get the cards or when processing the cards. He was using the personal information of his victims to try to make the charges look real. Eventually, Michael's scam came to Microsoft's attention. As we mentioned before, Microsoft's name is used in a lot of these scams, so they do look out for them and try to shut them down. They in turn reached out to the US Justice Department's Elder Fraud Strike Force, which includes the FBI and the US Postal Inspection Service, who, you might not realize this, are actually very good at investigating fraud. They're not just about postage stamps. And it was the Postal Service who took the lead here, tracking down Michael through the payment processes he'd been using. India's Central Bureau of Investigations were also involved in what has been described as an unprecedented investigation that includes searching the company's Indian offices and even the homes of its employees. On the 9th of April 2026, Michael Cotter, aged 64, was sentenced to 28 months in prison and was ordered to hand over assets to try to compensate his victims. Not exactly how he intended to start his retirement, I'm sure. So the most important thing I'm going to tell you about avoiding this scam is to talk about what happens if unusual activity is detected from your computer. Microsoft, Google, Apple, they're not scanning your computer from their website or from any other random website. They're not going to push an alert to your computer to tell you that there's a problem like that. If you get a message like that, just close it and move on. But to tell you a little of my backstory, once upon a time I used to work for some telecommunications companies, and on occasion, and I must stress this was very rare, we would see some unusual activity coming from a customer that did require us to take some action. We're talking about insane levels of usage that didn't match up to how regular users use the internet. What we absolutely did not do is send an alert to their computer. We temporarily suspended their internet service. The customer would then call us on the regular customer service number, and we'd tell them what the problem was and what we needed from them before we could unlock their service again. Now, to be clear, it's only your internet company who can do this. If you're looking at a message from Microsoft, Google, Apple, or anyone else, they can't do this. But if you're looking at a message from your internet company saying your internet has been suspended, it could be real, but you should still be wary. Close the window with the message and try to access another website. If it works, the message was almost certainly fake. If you can't close it, restart your computer, hold down the power button if you have to, and start it back up and try again. If you have another device on the same network, like your phone on your home Wi-Fi, try that. If it works, the message is probably fake. And if all of that doesn't work, call your internet company on a known good phone number, like the one from your bill, and check with them. And yes, you should have a good antivirus product on your computer, even if it's a Mac. This is a field that changes regularly, so I won't recommend a specific product. What I will say is check reviews on a good news technology site. CNET, PC Mag, and TechRadar are sites that keep regular rankings of what products are out there so you can find the right one for you. And that way you know you're looking at a real antivirus product and not something that's just going to hack you. Thanks for joining us on Scams, Hacks, and Frauds. In our next episode, we're going to look at how scamming works on a truly industrial scale, with scam call centres popping up all over the world, particularly in Southeast Asia, full of kidnapping victims forced to work for the scammers. We'll tell you 2 stories of hope and talk to cybersecurity expert Robert Siciliano, who has talked to the victims of these centres about the full scale of these centres and how governments have refused to act. Subscribe, so we'll see you then. Scams, Hacks and Frauds is available for free under the Creative Commons with Attribution Share-alike license. If you are reusing our content, the music cannot be reused under this license. You can find more information and our previous shows, along with all transcripts, at www.scamshacksandfrauds.com.